a paper bag filled with $50,000 in cash, an FBI informant, and a Senate confirmation hearing that just exploded into accusations, deflections, and unanswered questions. What you're about to witness isn't just another political hearing. It's a masterclass in how power operates when accountability is demanded. Let's break down exactly what happened when Senator Sheldon Whitehouse confronted Attorney General nominee Pam Bondi and why her responses, or lack thereof, reveal something deeply troubling about transparency in federal law enforcement. Senator Whitehouse opened with a question so direct it should have required a simple answer. He asked what happened to $50,000 in cash that the FBI reportedly delivered to an informant named Homan in a paper bag. This wasn't a theoretical question or a political talking point. It was about tracking federal money allegedly handed over in what sounds like a scene from a crime thriller. The question demanded clarity. Did Homan keep the money? Did the FBI recover it? Was it reported on tax returns? These are fundamental accountability questions that any attorney general should be prepared to address. But instead of providing straightforward answers, Bondi repeatedly deflected to a statement from Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, claiming a full review found no credible evidence of wrongdoing. Notice the pattern here? She never actually answered what happened to the money itself. Do you think that's an acceptable response from someone being confirmed to lead the Department of Justice? Whitehouse pressed the question multiple times, each iteration becoming more specific and harder to dodge. He wasn't asking about the investigation's conclusion, he was asking about the money's physical whereabouts. This is where Bondi's strategy became transparent. Rather than addressing the substance, she suggested Whitehouse could talk to the FBI or discuss this with Director Patel. Think about what's happening here. The person nominated to oversee the entire Department of Justice, including the FBI, is claiming she cannot answer basic questions about how federal funds were handled. Either she genuinely doesn't know, which raises questions about her preparedness, or she knows and won't say, which raises questions about transparency. When Whitehouse noted he wasn't getting a straight answer to a very simple question, Bondi interrupted to repeat the same non-answer about the investigation finding no wrongdoing. This wasn't just evasion, it was a deliberate strategy to run out the clock on questioning time. Then came Bondi's counterattack, and this is where the hearing shifted from policy discussion to personal accusation. When pressed about whether the $50,000 payment was declared on Hoseman's tax returns, Bondi pivoted entirely. She accused Whitehouse of working with dark money groups and pushing legislation that would subsidize your wife's company. This is a classic political maneuver. When you can't defend your position, attack your questioner's credibility. Whitehouse's response was measured but pointed. He noted that his questions were pretty specific and that responding with completely irrelevant far-right internet talking points wasn't helpful. This exchange reveals something crucial about modern political discourse. Rather than engaging with substantive oversight questions, nominees increasingly deploy personal attacks and whataboutism to avoid accountability. The question remains unanswered. What happened to that $50,000? Did federal money simply disappear into an informant's pocket without proper documentation or recovery?
Whitehouse then connected this cash payment to broader concerns about prosecutorial conduct. He mentioned that Hoseman was involved in a deal with New York City Mayor Eric Adams, allegedly saying he'd be back in his office up his butt if Adams didn't follow through on an agreement. This raises serious questions about the nature of FBI informant operations and whether proper protocols were followed. The senator then pivoted to asking about an Office of Professional Responsibility into prosecutorial misconduct by someone Bondi quickly corrected him on, the Honorable Judge Amal J. Bove III. This correction itself is revealing. Whitehouse pointed out that at the time of the alleged misconduct, Bove was a Department of Justice employee, not a judge. When asked what became of the OPR investigation, Bondi claimed it was pending litigation and she couldn't discuss personnel matters. But here's the problem with that response. OPR investigations are often made public, and summaries are typically provided when they conclude. Why the secrecy around this particular investigation?
The questioning then turned to FBI Director Kash Patel's grand jury testimony. Whitehouse noted that Patel told the committee his testimony was sealed by the Department of Justice after he was immunized and initially pleaded the Fifth Amendment. This is significant because sealed testimony is typically reserved for ongoing investigations or cases involving national security. Whitehouse asked how, when, why, and by whom Patel's testimony was sealed. Bondi's response? She wouldn't discuss testimony that could be sealed. Notice the conditional language, could be. When pressed on whether it was actually sealed, she refused to confirm or deny. Whitehouse then pointed out that Patel claimed he worked with the Department of Justice to have his transcript released publicly. If it was released publicly, that's no longer a confidential matter. Yet Bondi still wouldn't provide details, instead referring questions back to Patel himself. This creates a circular accountability problem where neither the nominee nor the FBI director will answer questions about their own agency's actions. Then came perhaps the most explosive line of questioning. Whitehouse asked about suspicious activity reports related to Jeffrey Epstein's accounts, documents that Treasury compiles and DOJ receives automatically. He asked how many of the hundreds of Epstein-related SARs were investigated by Bondi or Director Patel. Instead of answering, Bondi immediately went on the attack. She questioned whether Whitehouse had taken money from Reid Hoffman, whom she described as one of Epstein's closest confidants, in 2018 and 2024. She then asked if Whitehouse had posed these same questions to former Attorney General Merrick Garland over the past 4 years. This is deflection at its most transparent. The question wasn't about political donations or previous administrations. It was about whether current DOJ leadership is investigating suspicious financial activity related to one of the most notorious criminal cases in recent American history. When Whitehouse noted that 0 of these suspicious activity reports appear to have been examined, Bondi offered no substantive response. Whitehouse then raised public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photographs of President Trump with half-naked young women. He asked if the FBI found such photographs during their search of Epstein's safe and premises. Bondi's response was pure deflection, combined with accusation. She accused Whitehouse of making salacious remarks to slander President Trump while taking money from Reid Hoffman, who she claimed was with Epstein on multiple occasions. She also accused the senator sitting next to Whitehouse of trying to block the flight logs from being released. Then came her rhetorical question, "You're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein?" This response is remarkable for what it doesn't contain, any actual answer to the question. Did the FBI find such photographs or not? Does Bondi know anything about this reported evidence? Her refusal to address the substance while attacking the questioner suggests either ignorance of critical evidence in a major federal case or unwillingness to discuss it publicly. The questioning then shifted to federal judicial security. Whitehouse explained he had asked repeatedly for the U.S. Marshals Service to clarify whether they're investigating orchestration of threats against federal judges. This isn't about individual threatening statements, it's about whether organized efforts exist to intimidate judges through coordinated threats. He specifically asked whether the Marshals Service is allowed to investigate such orchestration under conspiracy, racketeering, or aiding and abetting laws, and whether they've taken any steps to do so. Bondi attempted to answer but was cut off by Chairman Grassley, noting the time had expired. Whitehouse invoked committee convention that if a question begins during allocated time, the witness may answer. After some confusion about whether Bondi wanted to answer, she finally provided a substantive response. She offered to sit down with Whitehouse, along with the director of the U.S. Marshals Service, to discuss threats to federal judges, including who threatened them or who orchestrated them. This was the first genuinely responsive answer in the entire exchange. Before the next senator could speak, Chairman Grassley interjected with what can only be described as partisan commentary disguised as procedural observation. He noted he was amused by Democratic colleagues bringing up Treasury suspicious activity reports regarding Epstein, pointing out that he and Senator Johnson used similar documents for their Biden family reports in 2020. Grassley claimed they were criticized by Democrats for using such reports and that for years Democrats ignored ignored the evidence of the Biden family criminality. This interjection is revealing because it demonstrates how oversight hearings have become arenas for partisan point scoring rather than genuine accountability. Instead of focusing on whether current DOJ leadership is properly investigating suspicious financial activity related to Epstein, a matter of significant public interest, the chairman used his position to relitigate past political battles and defend the nominee by attacking her questioners. What does this tell us about the current state of Senate oversight? Looking at this exchange holistically, several disturbing patterns emerge. First, there's the consistent refusal to answer direct factual questions. Whether about cash payments to informants, sealed grand jury testimony, or evidence in major criminal investigations, Bondi repeatedly claimed she couldn't or wouldn't discuss matters that should be part of basic oversight. Second, there's the strategy of personal attack when pressed on substance. Rather than explaining why she couldn't answer or what information she could provide, she pivoted to accusations about questioners' political donations, family businesses, and alleged hypocrisy. Third, there's the circular accountability problem, where the Attorney General nominee refers questions to the FBI director, who presumably would refer questions back to DOJ leadership. This creates a situation where no one is actually accountable for answering legitimate oversight questions. These aren't partisan observations, they're descriptions of what literally happened during this confirmation hearing. The implications of this hearing extend far beyond one nominee's confirmation. If the person nominated to lead the Department of Justice cannot or will not answer basic questions about how federal funds are tracked, how investigations are conducted, and what evidence exists in major criminal cases, what does that mean for the rule of law? Consider the $50,000 question. If federal law enforcement can hand cash to informants without clear documentation of what happens to that money, how can taxpayers trust that their funds are being used appropriately? If grand jury testimony can be sealed and unsealed without clear explanation of the process, how can we trust that such powerful tools aren't being used for political purposes? If hundreds of suspicious activity reports related to one of the most notorious criminals in recent history aren't being investigated, what does that say about DOJ priorities? These questions aren't about partisan politics, they're about fundamental government accountability. Do you think the responses provided in this hearing inspire confidence in federal law enforcement? What we witnessed in this hearing is symptomatic of a broader transparency crisis in American government. Regardless of political affiliation, citizens should be able to expect that nominees for high office will answer straightforward questions about how they'll conduct their duties. When asked about money, we should get answers about money. When asked about investigations, we should get answers about investigations, or at least clear explanations of why certain information must remain confidential. What we shouldn't get is personal attacks, deflections to other officials, and circular non-answers that leave the public less informed than before. The exchange between Whitehouse and Bondi demonstrates how confirmation hearings have evolved from opportunities for genuine oversight into theatrical performances where nominees deploy pre-planned evasion strategies while senators score political points. This serves neither party's long-term interests because it erodes public trust in institutions that depend on legitimacy to function effectively. When the Attorney General, the nation's top law enforcement official, models evasion rather than transparency, what message does that send? It's worth placing this hearing in historical context. Confirmation hearings haven't always been this contentious or evasive. There was a time when nominees from both parties would provide detailed answers to policy questions, explain their judicial or prosecutorial philosophies, and engage substantively with senators' concerns. The shift toward evasion and personal attack is relatively recent and has accelerated dramatically in recent years. This isn't about nostalgia for some imaginary golden age. It's about recognizing that the confirmation process has fundamentally changed in ways that undermine its constitutional purpose. The Senate's advice and consent role is supposed to be a meaningful check on executive appointments. When nominees can simply refuse to answer questions without consequence, that check becomes meaningless. When hearings devolve into partisan attacks rather than substantive inquiry, the public loses the information needed to evaluate whether nominees are qualified and trustworthy. Both parties have contributed to this deterioration, and both parties will suffer its consequences when they're in the minority and seeking accountability from the majority's nominees. This Senate hearing wasn't just another day of political theater. It was a revealing glimpse into how accountability works or doesn't work in modern American government. The questions Senator Whitehouse asked were specific, factual, and directly relevant to the position for which Pam Bondi was nominated. The answers he received were evasive, accusatory, and ultimately unsatisfying. Whether you support or oppose Bondi's nomination, whether you agree or disagree with White House's politics, the substance of this exchange should concern anyone who cares about government transparency and the rule of law. Thank you for watching this analysis. We'd love to hear your perspective on what you just witnessed. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Which exchange did you find most revealing? Do you think the responses provided were adequate? Your insights matter, and thoughtful discussion is how we make sense of complex political moments. If you found this breakdown valuable and want more detailed analysis of political developments, subscribe and enable notifications so you never miss our coverage. Thank you for your time and attention. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you in the next analysis.